cool things about the space in the store. The bathroom is through this side.
Just watch it if
So
it turns off.
right
To turn
as you
it
go in
back
the back
on.
of the
Where do you
store.
turn it on?
Number two, we're always serving waffles. They're as good as the scent would suggest, so hopefully afterwards you taste the food that we have here and the wine and stick around. Number three, we survive on books and book sales, so I hope you get a chance to look at our display. We have a lot of books that are suitable for gift giving and a lot of art books and period pieces from the 70s, so take a look. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to Charlie.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. And let's see, I'll start off with thanks to Larry Griffiths. As I pointed out in the today's Facebook, Instagram posting, if it weren't for Larry Griffiths, there'd be no Hallwalls, there'd be no Cindy Sherman, there'd be no Robert Longo, at least not in the forms that we, have come to know them. And there was the artist committee, there was all the other galleries and so on that happened at 30 Essex Street. So really, it was Larry's generosity that made that happen. A couple of disclaimers here. If I become arrogant and too hubristic, I apologize. and if I come up with any unflattering characterizations, it's just the kind of dick I am. I also I started to think about all the people I should thank for participating with the Hallwalls project. And when I got over 100, I decided I'm not going to read all the names. So, if you're on the list, you know that you're there, and somehow I'll make the list, and my footnotes here available somehow, someday, some way. So, okay, picture this movie, which is it's a cross between Reds, the Warren Beatty movie, and Cameron Crowe's Almost Famous. And the scene opens on June 21st, 1974, at the Essex Street Art Center complex, where Pierce Campy's coming in with a truckload of flowers that he and our other buddies had picked up at Forest Lawn Cemetery, kind of like at the dump there, to decorate the courtyard there for the first day of summer party. And this was something, in residence there, there were many factions. There was Dwayne Hatchett at the south end, and there was Don Robertson over there, and Pierce Campy was doing one thing, and Mike Zwack was doing something else, and Kitty Hamilton was living there, and we all conspired to have this first day of summer party. And I had met Longo through Joe Pannone earlier in the spring, and so Robert had a studio there at that point, and he mentioned his girlfriend, and so the camera zooms in to Robert's studio with Cindy Sherman with long Joni Mitchell hair playing a flute. Okay, and I don't remember whether my other friends were tripping, but this seemed to be a good opportunity to, if I'm going to stay up all night, I may as well have this reason or this, what would you call it, chemical facilitation. Thank you. Any help from the peanut gallery is always appreciated. So back to the movie. There's all these vignettes of almost like parts of the zoo. You go to see the lions and Well, my part was like the chimpanzees, I guess you'd say. But anyway, so that's the opening of the movie. And 3 years later, the movie ends with Robert Longo and Cindy Sherman driving out of the courtyard there because Cindy had gotten her $3,000 NEA grant, and she had no stake in Buffalo anyway, so she was out of there, and Robert certainly wouldn't wait any longer than he had to get out of there. So there's my movie, and so all you screenwriters, is that working?
It says memory card error.
And it's turned off like 5 times.
But that one's still running?
As long as the little red light's flashing.
Little red light's flashing. You can watch this tomorrow on YouTube. All right, so back to my movie. Yeah, so they leave. And, okay, so that's the beginning and the end of the movie. And then in between the beginning of the movie and the end of the movie is my list here of 200 and some events from when Robert Irwin came. Longo was in touch with Irwin in the fall of '74 about Robert liked Irwin's work. And it's interesting that now Robert is showing with Irwin's dealer, Pace. But so Irwin came for nothing. He was on this going around to schools and talking about his light-related installation work. And so he came and regaled us with his stories of the way he made money was as a gambler. He would drive his Cadillac to the racetrack, and that's how he made his money. And it seemed like I don't know, good idea for him. I don't know how to do that kind of thing. It didn't sort of change my course of doing things, but so we were off to the races at that point. Now I should say something about how I have become educated. My parents took my brothers and sisters and I to the Buffalo Museum of Science from when we were toddlers. And so there was that influence. And then there was the drugstore magazine stand where I learned all about hot rods. And then I realized that, well, hot rods really weren't that cool because there were actually people who designed really cool cars that didn't need to be modified because they were so well designed. So at that point I wanted to be Enzo Ferrari, maybe kind of mixed in with Jimmy Clark, making them, driving them, crashing them. That didn't happen, obviously. But so the way that I've learned things is drugstore magazine stand, then the Buffalo Erie County Public Library, very close here. When I was 12, I started taking the bus downtown and educating myself. I mean, school, okay, social control. I've been controlled. I try to stay controlled. And so I educate myself by going and doing things. You know, like college was good, going to Pratt, my 2D-dimensional design teacher gave us the four keys to the kingdom of art, which is see exhibitions, exchange studio visits, read all imaginably related literature, and then figure out your art. So, you know, once I got that, I dropped out of Pratt, saved myself, my parents a lot of money, and when I was back in West New York, I went to, Gallery West. I'm blanking on the guy's name. Anyway, he said, you should go over and talk to Larry Griffiths. And I said, okay, I will do that. And I had actually visited Dwayne Hatchett's studio, I don't know, a few weeks earlier, and then realized, oh, Dwayne's studio's at Larry's building being the Essex Arts Center. I think Larry bought the building in 1969. I visited in 71 and worked out a deal with Larry where I'd trade my sculptor's assistants for studio space. And so I think Larry was living in the building then because he was getting divorced, and I was living there because it's where I could live and work. I maintained a situation with my parents where I'd go to the East Aurora on the weekends and wait on tables at the Roycroft. Great irony, given that my studio's there now. And so weekends in East Aurora, come back to Buffalo, help Larry make a sculpture, and go to UB in Buff State and read art history in the library. When I say read art history, I mean the bound periodicals, Art Forum, Art in America, Studio International, etc. I read them all from, backwards from 1971 back to the 30s. And between that and go back to New York, crash with my friends from Pratt, and see museum exhibitions and gallery exhibitions. So, from 71, well, I was at Asher Hollow for like 5 months, 6 months, something like that. There was a situation where I was concerned about being drafted. And so I was looking at schools in Canada, and Ontario College of Art was right there, and really cheap, 10% of what it cost to go to Pratt.
Wow.
And turned out my draft number was way high. I didn't have to go to Canada, but I went anyway because it looked like it would be cool, and it was very cool. I won't go into all the details of that, but I did have the opportunity to go to Michael Snow's studio. That was part of there were the galleries in Toronto, stuff going on. Michael Snow was, an essential independent North American cinema figure. So after we had Irwin, I invited Michael Snow to come for a dinner at Hallwalls with Hollis Frampton, who was in one of Michael's movies. And anyway, it was a cool thing. That was January of 75. Catch my breath. At that point, we decided, I had talked to Larry about having an exhibition space at the 30 Essex Street building, and I had worked on it with Howie Friedman, who was a potter at the building. We had one room, was going to do it, and then Howie decided to go to School of Visual Arts. That didn't happen. Enter Longo, same pitch. Hey man, we gotta have an exhibition space. So make all this great shit happen. And so I put together, he and Robert and I came up with this show, working on paper. It was about 30 Buffalo, Western New York artists. Les Grims was in it, Paul Schertz was in it. Laundry list of everybody we could think of that we could make a show out of. And I guess there wasn't anything going on that week, and so both the Buffalo News and Courier Express, Nancy Tobin Willig came, and that woman. Anyway, we got great press, and so suddenly we were a thing, and we would go to New York, and we used this calling card of hey man, I'll give you a show if you play ball with me. And thus we were able to make friends. We networked. Ooh la la. That great word. That's what we did. We made friends, and Artist Space was a new organization set up to service unrepresented artists. That was us. And we went to them and we got some money for a little bits and pieces of stuff here and there. Their director changed to Edith Diak, and she was not interested in what we were doing. She was interested in graffiti, okay? And then she left, and the new director, Helene Weiner, she loved what we were doing. And she had come from California, where she was connected with CalArts people, Jack Goldstein, David Sally, etc. Okay, so in that movie that I was describing earlier, you know, I got my 200 events from December 1974 until when Longo and Sherman roll out the driveway in 1977. Highlights, that Working on Paper show, that in June we had a Buffalo Books show, kind of apropos, you know, the scene here. And in August we met with Jerry O'Grady at Media Studies, and he was putting together programming for the coming year, and basically he said, well, who would you guys like to see? And we said, Richard Serra, and Robert Morris, and he, I mean, we were not even his students, and he was playing ball with us. It was really wonderful. I'm skipping over a jillion things, but there, 75, we're in 75 now. We did an Art Park art show that was kind of vast, and you know, all the people that were at Art Park, and the great thing about our situation was using Media Studies and Art Park and the Albright as partners. Artists would come to visit those other locations, and we would scoop them up. We'd kidnap them basically, so that we could put them on our list and say, yeah, man, they came to us. You know, like Chris Burden. An amazing artist, and you know, very current. And he comes to Buffalo, and we bring him over to the upstairs at Hallwalls, and you know, we make some miserable dinner for him. And he went to a toy store and bought this car kit, made this little car and played with it, and then we threw it in the fireplace. And it was like, that's the thing, man. That's a Chris Burden event. I'll skip up to 1976. You know, for going back to how I educated myself, well, putting these shows together was a big educational experience for me. I would, you know, painting's a big deal for me, so I put together a 3-part show, Approaching Painting, Part 1, 2, and 3, and we got Robert and I went to Solowitz's studio and asked him for instructions for a wall drawing, which he sat down, wrote them out, and gave them to us. He's kind of an introvert and didn't want to come to Buffalo, but we did get Ron Gorshaw to come here, and Judy Pfaff to do one of her earliest installations. Ron Gorshaw came. I remember saying, we're interested in new young artists, and he said, I'm 40, I'm not young. And we said, well, we'll take you anyway. Come on up. And he was great. I mean, he's, you know, he died a year or two ago, and finally his work is getting the attention that it should. And Linda Benglis was part of that show. She came to Buffalo for Art Park stuff, but we picked her up. Gary Judkins was our transportation specialist, had this beat up van that we, you know, in hippie wear, drove off to the airport to meet Linda Benglis, who was, you know, fresh from her double dildo ad in Art Forum, like kind of glam. I mean, and weird, you know. But we went, picked her up, brought her back, and she gave a presentation. Peter Kotick decided to ask her, "What is art?" Which was a real, buzzkill. Peter, don't be an asshole. That's something you ask your parents, not like oh yeah, and then Richard Serra did come and screen films at the Albright. We started writing grants. We got, the first $8,000 grant, well, actually from NEA in May '75. We got 12 grand in September from NISCA, and October Vito Conchi came, which was in the same body artist, like Chris Burden, conceptual artist, and we had a whacked out reputation. Anyway, he came, he resided, he made an installation. It was very cool. The thing is, we go back and forth to New York with regularity, at least 4 times a year, to see the shows in the commercial galleries and to see the museum shows and to go pester other artists, as I said, offering this treat. You too can show in Buffalo and get $75 for talking at Hallwalls. We'll even throw in a $50 airplane ride, because the airfares were pretty affordable in those days. Don't want to put you to sleep. So, like I say, there were a couple hundred events, and the day-to-day life was quite wonderful. I mean, going back to my movie, that we'll see if that ever happens. The lay of the land there was really cool. I mean, because of the configuration of the building, it was there was a hall that we had the exhibition space in. There was the loft-like space where we lived. I mean, Larry had moved, at least me, I think I was in at least 10 different physical spaces, rooms you might call them, although they were sort of partitions of industrial spaces. When I was first living there, I was on top of 6, 8 mattresses on this concrete floor. I do remember rats running around. Ooh la la. Primitive. I mean, the thing with even in those days, I was thinking this is like a sitcom soap opera. This could really be segmented into all of these 200 events of the artist visits, the lives and loves of the people that lived there. It was there was a lot of drama. It was I mean. Paul Sheritz. Now there was our king of drama.
Yes. Yes.
I was pleased to make his acquaintance, but then he turned into a total jerk. And one after a Western New York show came and smashed our windows, and so I sliced his tires. and then he came back and in front of me he called the police and said, "I'm in this building and they're selling drugs to kids on the street." And then he left, and I'm sitting there thinking, well, I'm going to have a visit soon. And in fact, they came and visited, and I explained, well, there's this jerk that's broke my windows, and anyway, that ended, but not for Paul. Paul carried his drama on from scenario to scenario to early death. Sorry, Paul. I could go, on and on with all these things. I will say that in 2009, skulls for glasses, Sarah Evans wrote this thing for the Oxford Art Journal. There's no place like Hallwalls. And she said that Hallwalls is founded on Clough and Longo's dynamic friendship. We were dynamic. And she also said humor and hospitality were at the base, the foundation of this. And that we shared a taste for mock heroic self-representation. Some of the early posters, like where we're flying over Buffalo, she was referenced. And yes, in fact, we were sitting around late at night down at Jack Griffiths' place, because the liquor flowed freely, the pot burned up quickly at Jack Griffiths' place. So we're just flipping channels, and there is Saturday Night Live, the first one. And these guys are funny. This is good. We like this. So we identified with them, and actually when we had a show at the new museum, they showed up. It was very ooh la la and cool. So Sarah writes, by all accounts, Clough and Longo connected as much through humor and hijinks as they did through a mutual interest in contemporary art. They were, as Sherman recalls, each other's sidekicks. When asked separately which of the pair was the funny one, each man named the other. When pressed on the issue, Clough declared, "We had fun together." That would probably be a good way to end this. However, the little red light still blinking, that's a good thing. You could ask questions if you wanted. Good, no questions. All right, you got it. We're thinking.
Was there somebody that you had wanted to come that turned you down?
Interesting question. I don't think so. We didn't go so far up the food chain to Rauschenberg or Johns. Seems like, but yeah. And the thing is, again, relying on the Albrights to kind of bring these people in, like Bruce Nauman, for example. Linda Cathcart did a show with Bruce Nauman, and we hijacked them and put them through the questions, the nth degree, whatever, and picked his brain. I mean, Paul McMahon made these cartoons of people, a picture of us at Hallwalls picking each other's brains. That's what we did. Like, who's your favorite artist? I mean, Gorshaw, for example, introduced me to Otto Rank's Art and Artist, which is one of my favorite books. I recommend it if you haven't read it. There was, I will say, after I left Hallwalls and curated a couple of painting shows, Ross Bleckner and Julian Schnabel rolled up, and I said, "This is where you're going to stay." And they said, "Oh, we're going to a hotel." And okay, like I guess we were so, I don't know, such hippies that we thought that it was cool to live like we lived. They did not think it was cool to, and they both had very bland careers. And yes.
Yes. So I guess a pertinent question to ask would be, in terms of the community that was surrounding 30 Essex Street.
Yeah.
You mentioned that the News and the Courier both reviewed a show. I assume that was Tony Bannon for the News and probably Richard Huntington for the Courier?
Well, it was Jean Reeves. I was trying to pull her name out of my, 8 ball here. Jean Reeves was the first reviewer, and Nancy Tobin Willett for later Tony and Huntington reviewed shows, and there were even some little newspapers, you know.
But I guess the continuation of the question is, so at some point, outside of the makers who were involved in the scene there, and the artists that were on the scene, there came to be a buzz about this place on Essex Street on the west side. And for me, I was a graduate student in philosophy at the time, working on my never finished dissertation on Derrida and Wittgenstein. And at some point, I found myself, probably after 1978, attending one or two events, and then I joined the staff as we moved over to Main Street.
Yeah.
But at some point, the word got out, even in Amherst, on the Amherst campus, that there was this really cool place on the west side, and you had to go there. And there was a whole scene there around it. At what point did people from UB, for instance, start to show up at events?
Well, Dwayne Hatchett was in the first show, that drawing show. I mean, I talk about networking. I mean, I was going to Les Crims and Paul Sherritt's and Dwayne Hatchett, and I was trying to connect dots, and we were able to do that within Western New York, and then in New York City. Again, the configuration of the building, the way the parking lot worked, the interaction between the gallery space and the living space, really set up this dramatic space that helped. Of course, you know, I should point out the media attention. I mean, there was media to attend. I mean, now there isn't. I mean, you know, it's great that some produce pieces for the internet and so on, but you know, I mentioned going to the library to read the bound periodicals. The sense of that Art Forum, Art in America, Avalanche, those things had, at least for me personally in those days, I mean, that was my go-to place for information. That's where I gleaned most of my tips about who was cool. And yes, you get internet sources now, but it didn't configure in the same way. I mean, I'm sure there's tons of writing about the media landscape then and now, and it was, you know, profoundly different. And but the attention that we got from the news and the Courier really helped to, you know, give us credibility to the Albright, to media studies, to Art Park. Also, I was in your visual studies workshop in Rochester was an important factor. Nathan Lyons had started at UB, and then I think he went to the Eastman House, and there's some story about witchcraft in there that I don't remember the details of, but I mean, that's where, if there was a movie, if there was a series, there are all these vignettes of, like, you know, and the thing is, it's not dumb soap opera stuff. It's like, there's the intellectual story of, like, what's Chris Burton about, what's Akanji about, what's Sarah about, and I mean, it was so educational. You know, yeah. Tony, are you just waving at me?
Charlie.
Good.
What did it all do for you?
Well, it gave me my life. I mean, you know, I think about traditional education. You know, you graduate from elementary school, you graduate from high school, you go to university, and then you go into the world. Well, for me, I was trying to describe drugstore newsstand to the library to, you know, this primary information, sort of primary sources. You know, you go to you look up the phone number of the artist and call them up and say, hey man, I love your work, and would you like to show in Buffalo? And that made a connection to have the kind of education I had, which is, you know, life learning. I'm still working on it. You know, I mean, that's sort of what the show, you know, 120 books I got here. And some of them have writing in them. And, you know, it's like, I invite anybody to read the writing and see what you come up with. I mean, what's that other movie? It's a Wonderful Life. I feel like so blessed, and again, it wouldn't have happened without Larry Griffiths and all these other conductors of spiritual generosity, Jerry O'Grady, Edna Lindemann putting the Birchfield Center together, Bob Buck at the Albright, the curators at the Albright at that point. Lucky Chucky.
So I think we'll transition to the next phase, which is just hanging out. I do want to point out that the books on those tables are part of the exhibit and they're kind of one-offs and not currently for sale. But all the books on this table are for sale, as are the paintings. And there's a price list somewhere. I think that there'd be no better Christmas gift or holiday gift than a Charlie Miller. So, take it from the proprietor. And thanks for coming, everybody. Lastly, I'll leave a sign-up sheet for those who want to get on our email list. We have a lot of events coming up, so hang out. Thank you, Charlie. Thank you.